is everything we just watched. And now let's start our next activity. The presentation is Infrastructure for Brazilian Foreign Commerce. As a reminder that all presentations are on silent mode, so you'll be needing your earphones to hear what's being said. And now I'd like to invite Fábio Lavor, Executive Director of the National Center of Transatlantic Shipping, CentroNave. Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. A great honor to represent CentroNave. I want to start by thanking my friend Mario Samarco. I'd like to thank the organization for the invitation. Mr. Justo, it's an honor to be here. Mr. Anos is one of my bosses. Thank you again for the invitation. I want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure of Brazilian foreign trade. We saw a very interesting conversation yesterday. My colleague that led the mediation yesterday is present here today. We're going to revisit some of the topics that we talked about yesterday, some of the topics that needed further investigation. Let's start talking about CentroNave. We are a centenarian organization. Actually, we'll turn 100 years next year. So together we work with 97% of all containers in Brazil, corresponding to 34% of ships of the Brazilian fleet. Aside from turning 100 years next year we'll also celebrate 100 years of coffee in Brazil. 1827, so 200 years. The first seedlings coming from Guyana, landing in Pará. They didn't do so well. Finally, they migrated to Brazil, and finally, in the area of Vale do Paraíba, the Paraíba Valley, the plants finally found the ideal conditions. But not just that, they found a people ready to work, ready to invest in coffee. So it's our third centenary of coffee that lives through generations in Brazil. These are coffee pioneers. They did more than just bring coffee to Brazil. They were pioneers in infrastructure and logistics. The production grew. As it grew and became stronger, what else did we need to do? You need an infrastructure to move that production. So those coffee producers were thoughtful enough, as ship owners are today, to understand that there is more beyond their single product. They need to look at the whole chain, right? So railways, we need to thank coffee for their construction. So there's a lot about the industry of the state of São Paulo that we need to thank coffee for. All our companies receive foreign investments. We have hundreds of ships operating in Brazil. We work with hundreds of different countries. But let me tell you a little bit more about what we do. In order to have one shipping line, we need over $1.7 billion. So 8.5 billion reais. That's for 8 ships. So we have 300 ships. So this shows the commitment of these partners. Partners that keep investing in Brazil. I'm going to talk a little bit about the national port sector. Today, we work with 256 ports. We have different models. There are 35 public ports. They're divided in delegate ports. That means that they're run by the municipalities. There is the Port of Santos. And then there are other ports. As there are the concession ports, as the one in Espírito Santo. That's an example of a concession. Aside from that, we have 221 private terminals. There was a new legislation approved in June of 2013. We saw a surge in investments in private terminals. Then hundreds more were privatized, creating larger supply of terminals for the industry. I want to highlight a little bit the complexity of the sector. This is a very strong image, in my opinion. Why? Well, sometimes we talk about infrastructure. We did so yesterday. Montenegro spoke very well about it. Marcus did as well. Mr. Pomini highlighted that yesterday. There is a challenge in investing in Brazil. Yeah? There are many actors working simultaneously. And here we're trying to coordinate proposals, projects, and so on. It's a huge challenge. Look, there are those actors that work with the public sector, but there are actors that we don't really understand what they do. These are parts that are interested in the process, that are transparent about what they do, that influence the process, but sometimes we can't find them. And that's why it's important to us that are part of this large ecosystem that we recognize our role. Yeah? And that we also act accordingly. After all, if I'm a big actor and I can influence, I need to act accordingly. I can't expect someone to act on my behalf. So we need to plan our actions, we need to talk, and we need to coordinate. And that's how that organization needs to happen. Yeah? Not just between public and private, but especially among private. Yeah? The private sector can offer many diverging opinions, but when we have a unified voice, we can be much more efficient. Here are some numbers. Let's look at last year. We had 1.4 billion tons, again, along the 256 ports. But here's another interesting point. In Brazil, the port sector grows much faster than the GDP. So often we say GDP grew 0.5, 1%. The port sector grows much faster than that. Let's look at 2024 to 2025. We grew by 6%. So our investment can't be, in quotes, pegged to the GDP. So we need to invest much more. Here's proof that the southeast area is still the leading region of Brazil. The Port of Santos is the big star of the Brazilian system. Total diversity of export products. Yesterday we talked about the fact that 35% of ports are public and the rest are private. Whenever we talked about added value, those figures are the exact opposite. And that's why Santos is responsible for 30% of our exports. Let's look at our world fleet. Here are the main fleet owners. And I have to say, we are falling behind. The largest ship that we can accept is this one over here, 366. That puts us 14 years behind, 4 generations behind. We must invest. We must catch up. It's a challenging sector. There are a number of actors, often with divergent interests, but there's work to be done. So whenever a 366 comes to Brazil, like I'm going to share something with you now. This is 2015, Paranaguá, the first port. Then Santos, 2021. Notice that the first ship arrived in 2024. I remember this was a big deal in Santos. The whole city stopped. Media, journalists, they were everywhere. Orlando was there. He helped to organize the operations. The ferry had to stop. And then we decided, we can't work with it. There are too many restrictions. We were so frustrated. What a letdown. Oh, and now we're back up again. And that's why I want to repeat. The 366 is a big deal, wherever it is, but it shouldn't. 366 should be, a very normal thing. Whenever we have a deeper port that should now go up to 16 meters, that should be our everyday business. It shouldn't be a big deal that everybody stops and come to take photos. And that's not it. We should look further. That's what we need. It's not easy. It's not easy, as we said it. There are many hurdles ahead. But we must work. We must talk to all regulating systems, to all support systems. Yeah, taking photos isn't enough, right? A ship like this should be our part of our daily lives. Remember, we were talking about 256 ports. How many can accept? How many can intake the 366? 8. Only 8. And even worse, none of them can work at full capacity. So I have 8 ports that can accept that ship. They all have limitations. So that's wrong. If we were to look at it carefully, we'd realize that we're even further behind. So we should all be upset here, like in a good way. We should feel uncomfortable. It should move us to say, "Hey, what do we need to do to put pressure on the government, so that together we can find a solution?" We know that the Port Authority has worked. We thank them. We know how ungrateful that job is. There's a lot of red tape in Brazil, but we must keep working. That's how we're going to grow. Thank you for everything you've been doing. But this is something that should be done in every port. How are they doing? So let's go back here. Paranaguá, the second public port in Brazil. 16% in deficit for the 366. Paranaguá took another step. It made a concession for the canal. There are many obligations in investment, in building, and working with the limitations that we have currently. But this is one port. We need to work with the other 7 ports and all the other ones as well. So this is a scenario that everybody loses. The ship owners lose because they can't work at full capacity. The port loses because they can't operate with all the containers that they should be able to. And the freight loses. We lose. We that are trying to export lose. So that's the current situation. Despite the case of Santos and Paranaguá, there are many other cases that are further behind. Here are some recent news. Not 2 or 3 years ago. This is from late April, updated in May. So here it is. The port of Açaí, due to labor problems, they couldn't dredge the port and deepen the port. So we can't accept that that's part of our culture. That's part of our everyday lives. We can't accept it. Yeah? We must stay on it. Here's an example. Here are some numbers. Yeah? Sometimes they help us understand. Sometimes I talk about a depth, a restriction of 1.5, a draft of 1.5. I'm talking about 1,200 TEUs per week. 1,200 a week. It's a lot. It's a huge loss. And I've said it. That affects us all, especially freight. Here, a slide from two perspectives. First, the hat I wear today, a ship owner. Yeah, if I'm thinking about competitivity, I'm looking at a loss, at $1 billion loss a year. And my bosses are putting pressure on me. But here's the worst part of it. It's the loss. No, not my loss as a ship owner. Not my loss is responsible for shipping. It's the country's loss. It's the loss for the coffee sector, for pulp and paper, from manufactured products, from clothing. So this is the country's loss. And that's the number that should upset us. That's the number that should wake us up, that should get us moving, that should get us demanding to talk to our leaders. In other words, getting us starting to work to change the situation. We shouldn't feel comfortable in this situation as it is. We often talk about turning work into GDP. Yeah? So that's not enough. What about the future? Here is an image from April. We are thinking about expanding. Here are some ships that we have contracted already, and they should be in the water soon. Out of those, 45% can't even come to Brazil. We could even consider bringing it to Brazil. So I can't consider them in Brazil because they can't come to Brazil. They do not operate in Brazilian ports. So this is the main bottleneck. Other than that, we must invest in storage areas. Yeah. We also have problems in that area. Here are patio limitations. Here's another bottleneck. Berths are another problem. So what we need is better infrastructure. Nidia mentioned a contract that, they signed a contract and it took 2 years to be able to start operating. Let's talk about the T-Com Santos 10. Where is it? Yeah, let's put pressure on them. But yesterday we heard some good news. We heard good news the previous week. We identified the main goals of the government, and it was done so in a very calm, very sensible way. They had a proposal that, as we understand, it aligned what different sectors of the government are looking for. So we were very excited about those news. We think it's the last push that that contract needed. Now the government will take the next step, and we think that this will reflect over here.
We increase the berth, infrastructure, yard. They increase in our bottleneck. Moving on, I can see the bottlenecks here, way above our operational capacity. This is more specifically of Santos Port. We see that we are overloaded. And when we come to the berths, this is a sad number. I feel like crying when I see these numbers. And I remember 15 years ago when I came to the port secretary, and I said, geez, our berths, they are like 100% operation. This is amazing. That's great. He said, no, not really. Let me tell you something. The grade is far from 100%. These 100% here, these are queues. This is money being torn and ships waiting to come. Our grade is 65%. I said, geez, Luis, we have to invest. We have to authorize. So that must be done. So in this case, our 100% is no cool. It's 100% that really brings a negative impact and brings a lot of loss. So we must run away from 100%. And how can we do that? With investment. And we say that beyond like Santos 11, I have 12. I want to have 12. Because this is what we need. We need this investment in infrastructure. And again, we must know, coming to that information before, with that player, like those players that are involved, to say, who am I going to call? So the Port Authority has their hands tied because we want to talk, we want to criticize, but oftentimes they say, listen, that's not my business, not my circus, not my monkeys. I would love to solve that, but oftentimes I don't have the pen to sign that. So we must be sensible and think, okay, so how can we talk? How can we articulate so that we show not the problem, not the criticism, but to bring proposals for solution? So that's the point. And again, we cannot rest here. Not even the terminal, no berth should have like a operation below 65%. There's either a huge problem or a even bigger problem. So we must invest in structure. After that, Luciana, we think about structure, and then a little bit more in structure, and then we go to the fourth problem. That again, and I have a comparison with, so what's the impact in payment and the ships that we have today? Ships that are in the anchorage area waiting to come in. And this loss is not falling only for the ship owner or the cargo and the Port Authority. It will reflect on the supermarket shelf. It will repeat in the price of everything that we import and that I'm paying for the so famous Brazil cost. And on the other hand, this Brazil cost, on the opposite way, generates fewer jobs, lower production, makes me less competitive with countries that export the same products that I do. So it's that old saying, I cannot be competitive from the door in. I must have a competitive supply chain coming to the port with the ship owners and going to the destination port. So we must have all that in our radar. All that reading must be clear so that we can see the critical point of our chain. And unfortunately, today our critical point is infrastructure. Not by mistake, CS has brought two panels about this topic. One yesterday and another one today, because we have the need of infrastructure. Just like that 300 years ago, we started coffee in Brazil, and in time, coffee producers understood that they needed to have that for ports and railways. We need the coffee producers' support to raise awareness and to bring that investment in infrastructure. We must be all together on this. And to finish, in order to meet that demand, to meet that need for export and import, we need more ships. And in order to have more ships, we are building ships, like larger ships. But I forgot, the larger ones cannot come to Brazil. So we have to do that. And there's something else that these newer ships, they're not only bigger, more efficient, and allow cost reduction or a better cost reduction, but they're also way more efficient regarding carbon emission. So they have been built with a better energy efficiency. I'm not even talking about those with GNL, with gas or hydrogen, but just the fact, even those that use bunkers, 100% bunkers and 100% bunkers, the current ones are way more efficient. So we should have that in our radar. This is the impacts, that's the challenge that we have. We should be together. We should be sensible, and we have to work to change that scenario and to bring that investment. So what do we need? Infrastructure, investment in port, in berth, in decks, access, auctions, and only then we can come back and we can have the growth of our infrastructure that is proportional to what the cargo has been requesting, and then we can have better operation and be more present in the world market. This is just to show you, as I mentioned, sector was really excited with this position of GSD 20, so government is back on tracks again. We saw another one in the CVT, and it was talking about the expectations of having an auction this year. And that's really exciting because this is what we want. We want the auction, regardless who wins it, A, B, C, D, or E. We need the auction. We need the infrastructure. We need more berths. We need more terminals. Dear friends, I would like to thank you once again, Marco, for the invitation. I would like to thank CS, to congratulate you all for the 25th International Seminar of Coffee in Brazil, an amazing event. Thank you for the invitation and for the privilege of being here with you. Thank you.
Obrigada, Fábio, pela...
Thank you, Fábio, for your great words.